Hello! If you're new here, welcome to my channel. My name is Melissa, but if you are subscribed and you've watched my videos before, you know, my sweet, adorable subscribers, that you can call me Missy. Additionally, if you're familiar with my videos, you know that I enjoy doing fun skits in my videos. However, unfortunately, the reality is that I film my videos in batches and then I edit them in batches. And just for the last few weeks, things have been really busy and I haven't been able to do skits, but I was able to create some really interesting things. And so I hope that you will still stick around. With that out of the way, let's move on to our video. In today's video, I'm doing some springtime Renaissance Fair fun, and I am working on the next steps in my Renaissance Fair dress. I started out by making this adorable set of gingerbread themed stays and this magnificent chemise form the foundational layers to what will be a dandelion inspired, Italian Renaissance inspired gown. This dress design is going to be in 3 layers. So this being the under layer, the dress I will be making in this video will be the over layer, and then there will be another dress in a later video that will be the very top layer. But the gown that I'm making today is going to be representative of the dandelion flower portion, so lots of yellow. I'm excited to get it done, so let's get into the video.
Even though I already explained the concept behind this project, I wanted to still go ahead and show you my concept sketches. I drew a couple ideas of how I wanted it to look. I decided that I liked these rounded petals better and I liked the pleated bodice better. So that's what I'm going to be going with in the final project thing that I make. I wanted my bodice to cover up the stays completely, so I used the stays in order to create my pattern. It's just what made sense to me. After watching another creator, Abby Sue Costumes, I'll link her video down below, I watched her create an Italian Renaissance gamurra, which is what I'm doing here. And I noted that her pattern was very simple without any darts or anything, so that's what I decided to try and emulate as I was creating this pattern. But basically what I did to create this pattern was just folded my stays in half and essentially just traced them. And then I added some extra width to the shoulder straps and to the bottom end of the pattern. Once again, in order to ensure that my bodice covered up the stays completely. I additionally added a little extra width for some seam allowance. I did make sure to measure things out just to make sure that the side edges would match up and also the tops of the shoulder straps would be the same width. I used that same ruler to make sure all of my lines were straight before I went ahead and cut out my pattern. With my pattern pieces all cut out and ready to go, I just needed to cut them out of my mock-up fabric.
Okay. I have my mock-up pieces cut out, but already before I've done any sewing, I feel like there's going to be some problems. This is the back, and I feel like these need to be angled outwards so that when they come out in the front, they end up being more to the sides. So I think that's going to be a problem. I have my stays on. Let's go ahead and try and get this on my body somehow.
And so began the struggle of putting on the mock-up. It was in the crucible of this struggle that I realized that I would need to have my side lacing be spiral laced instead of cross laced because there was no way I was going to be able to put this on if I had to lace it up that way.
These pins right under my armpit are the hardest to get in, and I keep pinching myself. I have it on. This is actually not too bad. There's a little bit of funniness here, although it is a little gappy. I think that this top part will be all right once it's been folded in and sewn to a second piece. The back, I did a couple little chalk marks to show how much of an angle I need to add to that. And I think that will fix all of this bunching that's going on, because I think a lot of that is just coming from the weird angle of that shoulder strap. I'm actually really excited by how this looks. This front part, I think I'm going to fix by just adding very thin boning into that front part, and that'll help to kind of keep it a little bit more flat. So I'm going to go ahead and fix that back piece and cut another one of those, and then we'll do another try on.
So here you can see I have laid down my pattern piece on top of a fresh piece of paper, and then I'm going to lay the mock-up down on top of all of that. And then I'm going to trace about where I want that angle to then be. And again, that angle is based on the little chalk marks that I made on my very own back while I was trying it on, so it's probably not a perfect science. I then went ahead and drew some guidelines and traced my previous pattern, and then I went ahead and used a ruler to mark out where the straps need to end up going.
Here it is. I'm pretty sure I have a few new piercings in my armpit region, but it's on, and we can now talk about the fit. This is a huge improvement in the back. In the past, hoping for the best has worked out, so we're just going to do that this time and tempt fate again. Okay, so now that I'm out of the stays and my mock-up, I have prepared these curtains. Sheer curtains. So I'm going to do a layer of this on the bodice and a layer of this fabric, which I have so much of. This is one end. Just keep going and going and going and going. So I'm going to figure out how much of this I'm going to need. So I'm going to cut the bodice pieces out of this, and then I am going to dye them yellow. I'm going to cut some of that and dye it yellow. That's the plan anyways. So here we go.
I used this very exact method for measuring out how much of my fabric I would need, and that is just wrapping it around my body twice and hoping for the best, honestly. I continued with very exact measurement methods by pinching it at the point where I knew I wanted to cut it at, and then folding it at that point and cutting it. And I gave my camera a look here because I couldn't find my fabric scissors to cut them with, but it didn't need to be precise, so that worked out.
I've looked all over. I still can't find my fabric scissors, so I'm just going to use these ones because we don't have time for me to keep looking for my fabric scissors. Oh, guess who just decided to show their face in my mock-up fabric that I had left strewn on the floor? Yeah, my fabric scissors. Found them.
Unintentional shenanigans aside, I got to work cutting out my bodice pieces from the curtain fabric. For the front piece, I made sure to eyeball in some extra fabric so that I could do the pleats. Then I traced around my pattern piece with some chalk and cut it all out. I did the same thing with the back piece, except for I didn't leave any extra fabric because there's no pleating in the back.
And the back piece is done. Just about ready to dye my fabric, but before I did that, I wanted to show you these little test swatches that I had done. This is of that very thin cotton canvas material, and this is of my curtains material. I have gotten changed so that if I get any of this on me, I'm wearing yellow anyways. I've got water heating up here on the stove, and I've got all of my fabric here on the floor. So as this water's heating up, I've got a couple tablespoons of turmeric and some salt in this little guy here. And I can put this in with this stuff. And I've also got a tub of vinegar that I can use. All right, so I have my dye bath ready. I've got my wet fabric here, and I'm going to put it in there.
And now nobody can call me a liar because, as you can see in the video, I did put it all in there. I rest my case, Your Honor. The bucket that I'm using to dye everything is one that we had purchased a while back in order to mix concrete in. However, we never used it for that purpose. The purposes that we have used it for are sledding and dyeing fabric in. So it's been very useful, just not for what we had purchased it for. My kids were very excited by this science experiment taking place in our yard, and they enthusiastically helped me to stir everything. Okay, so I have the top end of it all tied together, and this end is going to be dipped into the dye bath. Here goes.
Here goes nothing.
And although it was spoken of by the prophets that nothing was what was going, something actually did go, and what went was me dipping this fabric into my dye bath and getting what seems to me a nice little gradient in the fabric. Seeing that my fabrics appeared to have been successfully dyed, I pulled them out of the dye bath and brought them inside to rinse them off. I had to be careful with my dip dyed fabric because I didn't want the dye to run into the white portion of the fabric, so I rinsed it out in my bathtub, as you can see here. And later, when I washed it all in my washing machine, I put the white portion of it inside a plastic bag. The rest of my fabric was a lot more straightforward. I was able to just rinse it out in my sink.
Welcome to a new day. I am here in my studio and it is a mess and I am already struggling to focus today. So I think I'm gonna do a quick tidy up first and then we're gonna get back into my project.
And so, my friends, tidy up I did. Are you like me, the kind of person who watches YouTube as you fold laundry or clean up your house? If you are, and that's what you're doing right now, comment down below. Let me know how it's going. In this segment, you can see all of my messiness and also some Pokemon sheets that I had gotten in order to turn into curtains for my son's room. They are still cluttering up my space.
Whew. Now that my space is all cleaned up, I am ready to get to work, I think. I was originally going to layer this yellow over this yellow, which is going to make it look even more vibrant, but I could alternately layer this yellow over this creamy white. I think a deciding factor for this is going to be how much I'll be able to see the brown. Okay, so here is just the white on top of my stays, and you can still see the stays through it, but if I put the yellow over that, it's a lot less noticeable, but I can still kind of see them. So let's try it with the yellow. That's almost even more noticeable than just the white. But when I put this over top, how bad is that? Oh, I feel like the yellow's almost worse than the white. What I really need is just white stays, but I probably won't have time to just make white stays. So I think this white is going to be my best bet.
It turned out to be very serendipitous for me that I ended up going with the white because I did not have enough of the yellow fabric. I barely had enough to do all of my petals, so I wouldn't have had enough of that yellow, and I would have had to do something like go back to making another dye bath, and I just wouldn't have had time for that in this project. So I'm really glad that it worked out. Once everything was cut out, I was able to start sewing in order to make some nice clean lines with this sheer fabric. I went ahead and did a French seam, which, if I am not mistaken, is when you sew it very close to the edge and then flip it inside out and then sew it again, and then you can just top stitch it down against the fabric. It makes for a clean, finished look whether the garment is inside out or right side in, as you can see here in my small demonstration of what it looked like when I was done. I did the same thing with my creamy lining fabric, which was less necessary, but it did ensure that I used the same amount of fabric to make these seams on both the top layer and the lining layer. And when I put it on, it makes me feel like the garment is well constructed. So the W's were had all around. I layered my two pieces together and I went ahead and top stitched around the edges, although I left the front center disconnected so that I could work on the boning and the pleats. Here you can see me marking out where I want the boning channels to go, and then I would go ahead and add the boning channels with some bias tape to the inside so that I wouldn't need to have a lot of extra layers and that it wouldn't show up on the front of the dress. In preparation for pleating, I went ahead and ironed down the front fabric. And then I pleated and repleated my fabric several times in order to get it to look nice, which is of course subjective. It was nice enough for me. With all of my pleats pinned down, I was ready to go ahead and finish doing my top stitching all around the edges of the bodice. I tried to be careful with this portion and take my time pulling out pins before I got to them so I wouldn't break any needles and or bend any more pins. A good portion of my pins have been bent this way. I finished off my side seams by folding them in, giving them plenty of space so that boning could be inserted into the channels that were made by this method. I then felt ready to go ahead and finish off the edges of my bodice. What you see on the screen is a good example of how I went about pinning down the bias tape to my bodice in preparation for machine sewing it into place. However, I did have to take this particular one out because I wasn't ready to do the bottom hem of the bodice yet. And that is because I forgot that I would need to add the skirt pieces to the bottom half of the bodice before doing this step. So I would have to undo it. Once the bias tape was machine sewn to the front, I was then able to flip it over, as you can see in this video, and then I just hand stitched all around the edges to make it nice and clean and crisp and finished, hiding those raw edges inside the bias tape.
It's another new day. I feel like I was just saying that. Literally yesterday. It feels like yesterday went by so fast. Hopefully I can get more done today. And today is the last day that I've given myself to work on this. So I really have to get this whole underdress done today. But I'm really happy with how this is looking. I feel like my hand stitching is getting faster. I feel like I'm not hating hand stitching as much. So there's some personal growth going on. So today I really need to get some grommets. I'm probably going to run to Joann Fabrics to try and find some more because I don't think I have enough. So here's what we're going to do today. I am going to hand stitch along these pleats just to make sure that they stay nice and crisp and pleated. I'm going to get some more grommets. I'm going to try and do a spiral lacing thing. I've never done spiral lacing before, so wish me luck. I'm going to need to get to work on my petals. I'm going to need to cut these out and attach them to my skirt pieces, which I also need to gather and attach to the bottom of that bodice. There is so much to do and I'm not entirely confident I'm going to be able to get it all done. So fingers crossed, knock on wood, all that good stuff. Let's get to it.
And so I got to work with some more hand stitching. Honestly, I love the result when I'm able to hand stitch something so that the seams and the stitches are almost impossible to see, but it just takes so long to do and I just don't have that kind of time. But the results are just so worth it sometimes.
I just got back from Joann and I picked up a bunch of things. I got more than I had intended to get, but they had a sale that was buy 3 get 2 free, so I figured I'd better take advantage of that. I got a whole bunch of eyelets. I thought these gold ones would look really nice with this project. I got a new seam ripper because it has yet to show its face for this project, and I have wanted to use it a few times. More grommets, some ribbon that I can use to lace up the sides, and this little thing that hopefully I'll be able to use on the overdress part of this project.
With that side quest complete, which was actually not a side quest because it was important for the actual goal that I have here. I don't know. Anyways, it was done. I kept sewing.
So this is what I have so far. I'm trying it on. It doesn't have the grommets in yet, so I can't lace it up. But I'm excited for how it's gonna look. I think it looks really good so far. I think this gapping at the top is going to be fixed somewhat when we've got it tightened. And then I forgot to sew this one down, but you can see how that pops up when it's on, and these ones don't because they're all sewn down. So I think I know what I'm doing. No, I don't know what I'm doing. The reason I have everything tried on is because I want to figure out what lengths I want my petals to be. It's gonna start at about here. And I think I want the first petals to be about that length, a second layer, and a third layer all the way down to the bottom. I want them to be as long as the length here. So let me sew from here to the hem of the thing is about 28 inches. We're gonna go with 29 inches just to give us some leeway. So longest 29 inches.
Blah, blah, blah. I eyeballed some lengths, wrote them down on my chalkboard, which was a convenient place to write them down so that I would have them available for me. All that jazz. You get the picture.
Just trying to figure out how I want to do this.
If you wanted to even space them, you could make the long 30, medium 20, and the short 10.
Okay. So we'll go with okay. I think I know what I'm doing then, so I'm going to get on it.
As you just heard, my husband swooped in there and helped me figure that out. It's great because he's really good at like really practical things, and I'm really good at just like making messes. So we really balance each other out that way.
I am a little worried that I don't have enough of this fabric to do all of my petals. I'm going to try and get them all cut out. I think I need 16 of these, 12 of these, and 16 of these really long ones. Here we go.
The clip you just watched really highlights just how genius my precise method of measuring out how much fabric I would need to cut and dye was. Which is to say, it was not at all precise or that helpful in this situation. I was truly concerned.
So while my camera was charging, I have been really busy. I cut out all of the things. Here's a set, here's the long ones, and all of the short ones have been sewn together. I have this white piece of fabric that's been sewn to the yellow fabric, and then I recruited my husband to cut notches in them and turn them inside out for me. So they will look like this. And then the plan to finish off these edges at the top is to use a decorative top stitch from my sewing machine, and that is going to look like this, which I think will be really cute. And then I'll be ready to start attaching the skirt to the bodice section of the dress. Yeah, there's so much that still needs to be done. So I am in crazy mode. I really need to get back to sewing.
Ultimately, the fact that I ended up having barely enough fabric for what I needed just made me more dangerous to society. One of these days, the lack of planning I do in order to avoid mathing will eventually bite me in the butt. However, it is not this day. And with my success, the meh good enough menaces grow stronger and chaos grows deeper roots in our society. Anyways, my success also meant that I had piles and piles of these petals to sew together. After they were sewn together, I ironed them flat, which may not have been necessary, but I felt like it probably helped. And when the piles of ironing had dwindled, there was more sewing to be done. And on I sewed, into the night, until my fingers bled. Just kidding, I'm just being dramatic. Although it did feel like forever. And I was still sewing into the night. Until at last, the petals were ready to be arranged. If you find this petal arranging montage satisfying, just know that I'm about to ruin it for you, because after I arranged the first set of petals, I went to arrange the second set and realized that I did not have enough of the medium-sized petals. I did have just enough fabric to make some extras. I really only needed 2. But this is what happens when I actually attempt to figure something out mathematically. This was also, of course, the point at which I gathered up the skirt so that it too could be placed on the bodice. I ended up top stitching all the petals in place because it just made life easier. And I'm all about that easy life, which is why I took on this project in the first place.
Okay, it's a new day. As I said yesterday, yesterday was supposed to be the last day I work on this. However, I worked on this late last night. I didn't get it done, but I got it close. And then I just had nightmares, so I woke up early this morning and I was like, hey, if I'm just going to have nightmares all night, I may as well be awake and work. So here I am. I didn't want to try and wake anybody up, so I'm still in my Lisa Frank Batman pajamas. And I am going to try and finish this up. I got all of the grommets in, and so the skirt is attached. I do need to add the long pieces to the skirt, and then I need to shorten the length of the skirt. Because there is a lot of skirt and then additionally these petal pieces, I decided that I wasn't going to try and put these in the waistband. Instead, what I'm going to do is just flip these over and then put that up against the edge and then just top stitch over that. Although that will show up on the front, maybe I'll top stitch onto the gathered portions of the skirt. And then I can fold these back down, and then these will all be in place as well. I tried it on, which is why I'm wearing all of this. I didn't feel like taking it off when I was done trying everything on. And it's looking really good, but I do need to hem the entire thing, so I gotta get working.
It might not be apparent in this section of the video, but I set my mannequin up to be about the same shoulder height as myself. I may have let it be just a tad taller since I would be wearing shoes with it. As you can probably guess by now, this was all based on eyeballing and there was no measuring involved. After ironing down about 1.5 inches, I set about actually doing the hemming. I did half of the skirt by hand, as you can see here, and I did the other half on my sewing machine, which I did not film here. But I used a technique with the sewing machine to make the stitches less obvious from the outside. I will link a video down below to an example of sort of what I did, although in the video they did a much better job about it. Although I did pin everything up before I took it back to my machine. I was just so out of time and so done with hand sewing. But this leads us into the reveal.
right, that's the video. I am so happy with how this dress turned out. It's just so dreamy and cute, and the movement of these petals, I love it so much. There are a few small critiques that I can make. First of all, the fact that these are white on the underside. On the one hand, artistically I could justify it by saying that the white underside somewhat represents how the yellow flower gives way and then becomes the white dandelion poof. But I've already sort of represented that in the white hem of the skirt. So I kind of wish that it was just yellow on the underside. I also kind of just wish that the entire top half was just a more saturated and vibrant yellow. So that can be achieved. I could just go ahead and re-dye the top half. But really, those are my biggest gripes with this. I think it's super duper adorable. I really enjoyed making it. If you enjoyed that video, go ahead and hit that like button. If you got to this point in the video, go ahead and comment a little flower emoji. And if you would like to see more of what I do sewing videos, I do art videos, I do home improvement videos, and then I'll just do like random things that are hopefully fun. And if you'd like to join along, you can subscribe, and then I will be able to see you in the next video. Bye. This is the fit. What am I doing? Oh.
There's a ghost stirring the water.
Yeah.
Ba, 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 ba. Oh, has it been recording this whole time?
I've been